one of the most effective things you can do to help people is to listen. And there are technologies of listening. And so it's like, are we aiming at the right target? And then you can start negotiating problem solution. And so but you can develop the patience to do that once you understand that that initial act of listening is in itself the most helpful thing you can do. Just listen. If you listen a lot, you can learn to track conversations across a very long span of time. And that's quite fun. You said this, but then you said this, and they seem contradictory to me. You're not accusing the person. You're saying, I see an inconsistency in the way you're formulating the problem. And they'll sort of startle a little bit and then try to rectify that. They'll check you out to see if you're insulting them or trying to play a game of moral superiority first. But if it's just an honest question, then you're actually helping them lay out a description of the situation that's not internally contradictory. And the great podcasters do this. You see this with Rogan. All Rogan does is ask stupid questions. And the way he does that is by consulting with his own ignorance in humility. Rogan is listening. He's thinking, I'm a stupid lunkhead and I don't understand this. What do you mean? And that's brave because he's exposing his own ignorance, but it's honest because he doesn't understand, but it also unites him with his audience because, especially with someone like Rogan, the probability at this time that if Rogan doesn't understand the gist of the conversation that 95% of his audience doesn't understand it's like 100%. The importance of listening can't possibly be overstated. Listen, ask questions until you understand. And by doing that, you also help the other person clarify the situation.
It is so hard to do. And I think we have to just pause at that step because it is, as you said like that's 95% of the challenge. It is so hard to do in relationships, in work. I've sat literally at this table with a colleague of mine about a year ago, and she was telling me, she works in one of my companies. She was telling me that she's unhappy in her role. And I remember sitting here and she gave me a bunch of reasons why. And I kept asking and asking questions. And after just 30 minutes of asking the questions, she had decided that in fact, everything she had just said was not the issue. And then it related back to a much more fundamental issue of just meaning in her work.
Okay. Well, that's very important. That's very important. Jung called that a circumambulation. You're sitting there thinking, well, she's laying out her problems. Maybe you're getting defensive. Well, that's not true. The company's better than that. That's an unfair accusation. So you're feeling on the spot. Plus you want to jump in with your solution because you want to show that you're bigger than the problem that she's showing, or maybe you're secretly attracted to her and you want to be a white knight. I mean, there can be 50 things. You're sitting there thinking about what you're going to say next because you want to play dominance, or maybe you think that's what you should do because you're a boss. And it's like, there's a lot of things that'll interfere with listening. But so you learn, you say, just shut up, ask stupid questions until the person that you're listening to has specified the problem. Now, if you're very fortunate, both of you will converge on that and it'll just become clear. Think, you pointed this out. This is what that's really all about. Now, the person may be discovering too that they were resistant to that conclusion. Because the fundamental threat is more key to their self-esteem to their conception of themselves than allowed them to be comfortable. Before they get to the actual point, which is where they're going to be most vulnerable, they're going to throw out a bunch of screen concerns just to see if you can be trusted with something that will reveal their vulnerability. And they're even doing that to themselves. It's like, dare I tell the truth about this situation? Because I've betrayed myself before, so maybe not.
You're so right. They test you on the way to the truth to see how you'll respond.
Yes, and they're testing themselves too.
Yeah.
And you can facilitate that. See, if you facilitate that by calm listening, then you're modeling the fact that whatever the hell they have as a problem isn't so terrifying that you have to avoid it and run away.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so interesting what was actually revealed, because this person that works in one of my marketing teams in a different company where there's a CEO said to me, it's the work they were doing that was causing them the unease, and that's the reason they wanted to leave, etc. And I asked them the question after about 30 minutes, when was the time you were most happy in the business? They revealed to me that the time they were most happy was when they were with me overseas at the very beginning. And what that really revealed at its essence was there'd been a change in the proximity to me and the real meaning of the work. The happiest time was when they were right next to me doing the most important stuff.
Right. So the most difficult problems when they were solving the most difficult
Yes,
problems.
when they were most challenged, and they were. So really, the fix wasn't what they thought it was. The fix, and they're now, they actually texted me. I sent them a message to one of my team members last night saying, I just don't want to. I want to keep their identity. So let's say they were with me in Canada. They text me when they were most happy. They text me last night saying, I feel like Canada Jenny again.
Right.
And all the adjustment that had to be made was getting them back close to bigger challenges.
Right. So they wanted to be closer to the front line, as it turned out, because maybe you'll raise an eyebrow, or there'll be a micro expression of disgust or contempt, or you'll look away, or because I'm going to be evaluating you to see how you're reacting morally to my revelations. So Freud just hid himself. He said, and I don't think that's strictly necessary, but it's a very wise intuition, and you can imagine how it would be helpful. So now I think the counter to that is you can signal to someone who you're talking to, like open reception of the message they're receiving, right? It's just that, and kids love this, right? One of the things kids are doing all the time is testing you to see if you're paying attention. Like, if we're going to battle this for like decades, we better not wear ourselves out. Okay, how not to? Well, let's make some rules. They're like negotiating rules. And you can do this. This is good advice to the degree you can give people advice about a relationship. Here's something to understand about your marriage, okay? You are going to have to listen to your wife 90 minutes a week, okay? And you might as well just get that through your thick skull. Now, why? If you listen to her enough, you can make peace and you can play.
Why don't men like to listen?
Well, often because the insufficiencies are pointed at them, and sometimes, especially if the woman, let's say, and this can go both ways, let's be sure about this, but we might as well revert to the stereotypes. And I think it's fair because women are more threat sensitive. So they're more likely to bring up problems. Now, that's the disadvantage is they bring up problems that don't exist, because that's a false positive. But the advantage is they bring up problems before you're sensitive enough to see them. And so this is very important. If you think about the role of women, is the woman is closer to the infant than you. Okay, so you're, doing whatever the hell you're doing. You're concentrating on your career. You're not, especially when the infant's under a year old, you're a step removed now, and good, you can be dealing with the external world, but she's concentrating on the little kids. And one of the things you want to hear from her is what the hell's wrong with the kids before you're wise enough to see it. Now, the price you pay for that is she might be shorting out about things that don't exist. So, and this is especially true if your wife is high in neuroticism, and it could be true if the husband is too, but as I said, that's the more stereotypical situation. So why listen? To get to the signal. Now, will she get to the signal? Yes, although she might not be very good at that, and it might take a lot of listening. But if you listen long enough, she'll get better and better at it until she'll get like really good at it. And then the time between the emergence of the problem and the solution it'll collapse to the point where it's virtually immediate. Now that's a very high level of mastery. That can take a very long time. But then, you also want to put forward to your wife and yourself the proposition that you're better than you are, which is, well, I get the problem, I can solve it. It's like, no, you probably don't get the problem. And even if you did, it isn't necessarily the case that you could solve it. And so you have to put up with the fact that you're going to have to be dragged through the mud, because she's going to point to, maybe her kid's upset because you're a tyrant. And you probably are a tyrant to some degree, clomping around, overconfident and all that. And so she's going to poke you. Well, maybe this is how you're stupid, or maybe this is how you're stupid, and maybe this is how you're stupid. Long list of potential ways and actual ways you could be stupid. So you have to listen to that. Now, your wife has to act in good faith. One of the things that Tammy and I did when we first got married, because I thought a lot of this through before we got married. I said, look, if we're going to do this, you have to tell me the truth. I don't care what it is. I'll tell you the truth, but you have to tell me the truth. I don't care what the truth is, but it has to be true. Right. And so without that, you get nowhere. And you can't trust your partner either. And so your partner has to be all in. That's why you have a marriage vow. Because the marriage vow is basically this. This is the vow. And that's a bitch of a vow, man. Because when someone unveils their whole heart, they unveil themselves all the way down to hell. It's not pleasant. It's awful. And so they need to know that you will not run away. And that's a vow, because what do you know? Look, the person's always going to be thinking, always, if you really knew who I was, you wouldn't love me. You wouldn't be with me. And, hey, fair enough, because people are full of snakes.
Can we ever fill those, or can we just put planks of wood over them?
Oh, no. You can't put planks of wood over them. You have to fill them. And what you do, and you can do this. Let's say you were bullied repeatedly when you were a kid. Okay, you're probably still being bullied, because if you didn't, being a bully victim is a stable trait. So the great analysis of bullies that have been done, Dan Olweus in Sweden did this, who is a great psychologist. He analyzed bullying behavior and bully victim behavior. So he defined bullying very carefully. You're a bully if you use power disproportionately. So like if I'm 12 and I'm picking on someone my own size, I'm not a bully, right? Because the risk to me is commensurate to the risk to them. That's just aggression. That's just competition. And even if it's violent, it's not bullying. A bully is when I'm 12 and you're 8, or when there's 2 of us and 1 of you, or when I get you in a position where you're completely vulnerable and can't defend yourself. Imagine a bully comes into a room full of kids. He'll poke at all the kids, and one of the kids will manifest a disproportionate emotional response. Well, then it's like he just zeroes in on that. And those are often kids who are higher in neuroticism or who are fragile for other reasons. And then that can become permanent. And both the bullies and the bully victims have a negative long-term developmental trajectory. The bullies tend to become criminal and alienated on that front, especially as they move into high school. And the bully victims tend to become depressed, anxious, and dependent. If you have a partner who's been a bully victim, for example, that's going to be brought into your marriage. And then one of the things that's going to happen is every time you try to have a dispute, which is to actually think and solve a problem, they're going to see you through the bully template. They're going to treat you like you're a bully. They're going to accuse you of being a bully. They're going to bring up all the times before when you acted like a bully, and then you're going to have to defend yourself. And part of the reason that people can't listen is because they also don't know how to defend themselves. It's like, especially if here's 15 pieces of evidence that you're a bully. It's like, can you counter those? Maybe. What if you're not very articulate? It might take you 2 weeks to think up how to argue yourself out of that. Plus, you're going to be doubtful about it. So those are very complicated things to work through. But you can listen. If you listen, the person will dispense with some of their accusations by themselves. The accusations that can't be dispensed with, though, now those are questions. Maybe your kid's upset when he or she's interacting with you, and your wife says, well, you're too hard on him. It's like, well, are you? Well, it's time for you to go away for like a week and meditate on that, right? And that's soul searching, right? You're going to go down to the bottom of your heart. It's like, well, are you a bully? Are you a bully like your father was a bully? Are you a bully like a friend who was a reprobate that you admired and tried to copy was a bully? You have to see, because maybe you are. Maybe you should stop. But then you also have to figure out how you would be if you weren't being a bully. Then your wife can help you, and this is another good rule for couple conflict. Like, let's say I'm unhappy with you. So I come and tell you that. You can ask me, okay, what do you want? If I could give you what you wanted, what would it be? Well, I don't know. It's like, no, sorry. I cannot hit a target you won't specify. Let's discuss it at least. And so this is also if you're an employee. You got to know this if you're an employee. You're going to your boss with a problem. Why don't you go with a solution too? And if you're the sort of employee who goes to your boss with a solution, you'll ratchet yourself up the hierarchy. If you're in a halfway decent business, you'll ratchet yourself up the hierarchy so fast you can't believe it, because you'll get a reputation as the person who can solve the problem. So, and you can actually play with this in your marriage, because one of the things that you can do, for example, is, well, let's say you say something that irritated your wife. It's like, okay, it's an open question. Why? Maybe she's too goddamn sensitive, and maybe you're too much of a son of a bitch. It's like, who knows, right? But you can ask her, okay, if I had said what you wanted me to say in that situation, what would have I said? Now, that's a hard question. She has to think about that. It's like, well, what would have worked? And then she'll say, well, maybe you could have said this. And then you can say, okay, let me say it. Now, then she has, but it's sort of like, let me say it. It'll be sort of fake. But I'll start by just saying it. So she'll tell you what to say and you can say it. Now, If you're absolutely 100% unwilling to say it because you think it violates your conscience, that's a whole different issue. That means there's a deeper discussion to be had. But maybe you could try it. You know, you could try it out for size. And maybe she could see if that sort of satisfied her. And now you've got a rubric for how that interaction might go in the future. Let's make it concrete. You come home at the end of a workday. You know, you might think, okay, so you come home after work. What would be the best way for that to unfold? And you have to negotiate that. And I would say, let's parameterize that a bit. You're probably hungry. Well, you don't want to talk to someone. This is another great rule. Don't talk to your partner about something complicated when they're hungry. It's not going to work. So maybe you come home, you have something to eat, you kick off your shoes, maybe you take 10 minutes for yourself, and then you can talk. But you want to get that right. Or maybe you come home, you meet each other at the door, she gives you a hug, you have something to eat, you relax for a minute, maybe you have a shower. But then you've already negotiated about when you're going to have a conversation and you're going to be prepared for it. Now, people do this in the business. You don't just randomly discuss a bunch of problems at your business if it's running reasonably well. You have a meeting, it's parameterized. You kind of have an agenda. You have to do that at home. You have your home is also a small business and it has to be run like that. They treat them as if they're pawns of the administration. It's sickening. And so I invite them down to Miami and we make them a good financial offer and we treat them like people we're very pleased to have there and that we hope they'll come back. And they have a really good time and they deliver. And we say, look, they say, well, what function do you want this course to serve? You know, because maybe they're worried that there's a political agenda or something like that. And our rule is we picked you for a reason. You know what we're doing. You tell us how to get the hell out of your way so that we can enable you to teach the course you've always dreamed of teaching. We will provide you with the audience you've always wanted, which will be people, because they have a live audience, and the live audience members we select are selected because they want to come and listen, which is what you want for students. And so we want to have the dream experience for the professor. Come, talk about what you love to people who want to listen, plus we'll provide you with maybe enough financial security so you don't have to be concerned about your damn university anymore, which is also something I'm quite pleased about. Now, I don't know if we can deliver on that, but even the initial, we give them an advance, like with a book deal, and even the initial advance generally is a sizable sum. It depends to some degree on their following, right? Because we do some economic calibration, but I would love to be in a position where I could take like the best 1,000 lecturers in the world, bring them onto Peterson Academy, give them financial independence, because that would be really amusing. And then to bring what they have to say to everyone for almost no cost.
You've taken a first principle approach to trying to build a new university, bringing the best professors together, giving them the freedom, making sure they're not censored in any way, giving them the audience and the remuneration and appreciation they deserve. When does this university, Peterson Academy, launch?
Early 2020. I still have a lot of pain, so that's annoying, but not anywhere near as much as I did have when I was really sick. So like I almost always feel like I have a relatively serious flu, achy. It's some neurological problem and I have no idea what it is and neither does anyone else. But I'm not anxious at all and my head is very clear and I have such a ridiculously interesting life that the leftover trouble is basically irrelevant. You know, I wish it would go away, but whatever, it's not that big a problem. One way to increase the probability that things will unfold for you properly is to not lie. Just stop lying. Period. Stop saying things you believe to be untrue. Stop doing things you know to be wrong. Just start with that. You'll get closer and closer to the truth. And the truth is the adventure of life. That's the advantage to the truth. You have the world on your side. But obviously, because if you're lying about things, you're opposing reality. Who are you? Who are you to oppose reality? Good luck.